This video was prompted by a video by an expert that included a claim that EVs were less green than Toyota hybrids. I feel three mistakes in the logic in that video lead to the mistaken conclusion that the less fun, far slower hybrid vehicle is greener. While the conclusion from that video does support that problematic "we must suffer to save the planet" trap that oil companies would like us to believe, turns out that no, we don't need to suffer to do what's necessary to protect our standard of living. Yes, there are still questions on both EV charging and whether current EVs are an ideal solution, but they're left for other videos, and this video is about emissions from driving EVs, or in EV mode, as opposed to driving hybrids. The good news is we can still have fun cars while taking best steps to avoid climate eroding our standard of living. Welcome to a One Finite Planet EV video looking at how green EVs are compared to hybrids, and the three errors in a recent video on BYD's 1 megawatt charger that presented a case for Toyota hybrid RAV4 being greener than a similar EV. This video takes a look at that claim and the three errors in that claim, with discussion on the 1 megawatt charging being left for another video. Whether you've seen the video I refer to or not, it is by a genuine expert on the mechanical side of vehicles, who gets far more correct than the average content creator. But just because it's in a video doesn't make it correct, and you have to learn who to trust and on what. Almost all EV videos need fact-checking, particularly on the electrical engineering side, with many great communicators lacking background. Plus, many suffer from confirmation bias. But revealing sources, as this one does, is a big help on trusting what's said. But what about what might have been missed? The video begins with mostly valid criticism of the somewhat overstated significance of the BYD 1 megawatt EV chargers, something I also further question in a video to be linked below, and then goes on after some misleading jokes on EV range, also see link below, and calculates that a RAV4 hybrid would emit about 46 kilograms of CO2 when driven 400 kilometres, and the Tang L from BYD would consume 82 kilowatt hours of electricity. Note that while 46 kilograms of CO2 for the RAV4 is an official figure achieved only in test conditions, it's no more optimistic than the 82 kilowatt hours for the Tang. Both may be optimistic if driven at Australian freeway speeds, but they're comparable and the best figures available, as is the figure of 647 grams per kilowatt hour, typical of emissions generating electricity in Australia. While there may be errors in the video resulting from confirmation bias, there's no intent to deceive. This data really does show that for travelling 400 kilometres, RAV4 generates tailpipe emissions of 46 kilograms of CO2, meaning it would only burn 20 litres of fuel, while 53 kilograms of CO2 would be produced, generating electricity for the Tang L. If charged from the grid or from home solar that would otherwise have been sent to the grid, the figure is still valid. That is 7 kilograms more CO2 to charge the EV battery than from the RAV4 tailpipe. But, well, wait, there are still three flaws that make the comparison misleading. Firstly, it's comparing a 163 kilowatt medium-seater, 5-seater SUV capable of 0 to 100 km per hour in 8 seconds with a 810 kilowatt 7-seater large SUV capable of 0 to 100 km per hour in 3.6 seconds. The Tang L goes from 100 km per hour to 200 km per hour in 6.19 seconds, which is faster than the RAV4 does a 0 to 100. Not exactly like for like here. Since when did fossil fuel advocates become the fun police? But are the emissions actually higher? Second, this is comparing tailpipe plus energy source CO2 emissions of an EV with tailpipe emissions of the hybrid while ignoring the energy source emissions of the hybrid. Okay, the EV has zero tailpipe emissions. Emissions producing those kilowatt hour of energy result in 53 kilowatts of CO2, while the hybrid produces 46 kilograms of CO2 from the tailpipe. But the emissions extracting, refining and shipping the petrol/gasoline to the hybrid tank seem to have been forgotten. Of all the calculations in the web version below, but AI confirms 10 kilograms of CO2 will have been generated getting the 20 litres to Australia and ignoring any extra emissions getting it to the tank. This means the RAV4 is responsible for more emissions than a 3-row EV that accelerates like a BMW M Series sedan. For a similar fun level, the picture would look more like this with a BMW X7M, which is another 3-row over 5-metre long vehicle and with close to the same performance. Still slower, but more than double the emissions and not a Toyota hybrid. Thirdly, while the RAV4 bought today will still be emitting 2.3 kilograms of CO2 for every litre of petrol gasoline for every year of its life, grid emissions fall every year. Original new car buyers of RAV4 hybrid or Tang L will likely sell their car within 5 years, but then it goes to another owner who will again expect to sell it rather than just scrap it. And between all owners, the average new car now lasts over 20 years. Yes, the average age of privately owned passenger vehicles in most countries is close to 12 years, currently 11 years and rising in Australia, according to the Bureau of Statistics. But the average age is around half of the lifespan, which is why the average person you meet in Australia is not an 80-year-old, despite life expectancy for people in Australia being over 80 years. Yes, cars last 20 years. And grid emissions over the 20 years from 2025 to 2045 are projected to fall from current levels to basically net zero, which means if targets are achieved, average emission from the EV will fall to zero and on average over those 20 years be around half of what they are today. So for the 20 years of emissions driving the same distance, the high power 3.6 seconds 0 to 60 big 3-row EV will result in less than half the emissions of the more boring 2-row 8-second 0 to 100 hybrid. That more than 2 times the emissions for the smaller, far less powerful hybrid is a more complete picture of the emissions from driving these two vehicles. Build emissions are not covered in either that original video nor fully in this one, but while there is more in another video on EV lifetime emissions, the summary is, between these two, there's nothing in it. Build emissions created controversy in 2020 following a Volvo report showing that the EV Volvo XC40, built on an ICE vehicle platform and with an NCM battery, resulted in higher build emissions than the regular XC40. Fueled in the worst case dirtiest grid, offsetting those higher emissions against driving emissions could take 7 years. But that's not the case here. Yes, the larger 3-row SUV should have higher build emissions from its larger body panels, but using an LFP instead of NCM battery approximately halves the build emissions due to the battery, which have also fallen since 2020 as expertise in making batteries has improved. All else being equal, a 2025 LFP ground-up EV will have similar build emissions to a similar ICE vehicle. But of course, all else need not be equal. The EV in this case is a larger vehicle built in China with a grid that, according to ChatGPT, is based on 30% renewables, while the RAV4 hybrid is built on Japan with a grid that, again, according to ChatGPT, is dirtier with only 20% renewables. Who would have thought? In the end, it seems about equal between these two. And once factored over the full vehicle life of 20 years, will have little impact unless the two vehicles have a very different lifespan, which is examined in a separate video to be linked below. The problem for the hybrid is chemistry. 1 litre of petrol/gasoline is 87% carbon by weight with around 652 grams of carbon. So burning it results in around 2,390 grams, 2.39 kilogram of CO2. You can't change that. All you can do to reduce emissions is burn less fuel, which reduces power. Combustion engines can be lots of fun, but they can't both be lots of fun and low emissions, the ones that are the most fun don't have low total emissions, while the 810 kilowatt EV can be fun and have low emissions. The boring vehicle solution to reducing emissions is the fossil fuel industry dream because it makes reducing fuel use boring, which in turn helps stop people wanting fuel-efficient vehicles. Yes, EV charging doesn't work for everyone, but even with the Tang L, there is a PHEV EV hybrid version that delivers its full power from the electric motors, giving fun and lowest emissions when charging is practical, and hybrid economy the rest of the time. Tech so good, Toyota is looking to adopt it. In many ways, the fact that the EV, or EV-based hybrid, is both more fun and will cost less to run, as covered in another video, is more important than technically being greener, because the real battle is for future living standards. The EVs aren't green claim is usually made by people who've been convinced by oil company influence campaigns that the green future will mean reduced living standards, when the truth is, other than for fossil fuel companies themselves, the reverse is true. Extreme weather events, like current record floods in Queensland, push up prices for food, insurance, construction, and taxes for all, and remind us that the current 2025 record hottest ever March recorded for Australia are not without cost to living standards. Just as stopping with halfway steps, like the non-EV hybrids like the RAV4, reduce living standards by meaning a less exciting vehicle future than with real solutions. What we need is not going without to save the planet, but protecting living standards from both climate impact and from inappropriate steps to avoid climate impact. It turns out, with the right approach, we can protect living standards that are threatened by climate change and have fun.